Thanks, Catherine. Minister, there's a lot of disturbing aspects to the O'Higgins report. The fact that documents weren't passed over for many months to the Commission. Haven't heard much comment about that. The fact that there was clear bullying and victimisation of Sergeant Maurice McCabe when he exposed poor investigation and wrongdoing. The fact that there was clearly a culture within that district that emanated from the top, because why would low-level Gardaí, in terms of their rank to Garda McCabe, feel that they had the confidence to accuse him in the wrong of wrongdoing and try to plant and get him into difficulty? But the fact that nobody is held accountable after this report. The report concludes there was corporate closing of the ranks, but it wasn't unconsciously, of course, and there was no question of bad faith. I don't think investigations like this, Minister, should be done by people who are part of the legal system. I think they should be done by outsiders. But the theme that I want to take up with you, Minister, and I think it's one you might be concerned about, I hope, is one sub-theme that hasn't been brought to light from the cases that I studied in the Commission's report, and that is the issue of violence against women. Because surely you must be disturbed at 3 cases in particular where women were the victim of violence or potential violence, and nothing really was done about it. We should be screaming about that from the rooftops, because I see some similarities in bad attitudes among these Gardaí. I've seen it in my own district as well. Let's take the King's Court bus incident. This is a female bus driver who, by the way, isn't prone to be scared easily, had said herself she worked as a bus driver and a taxi driver in Dublin in some of the toughest areas. This woman ended up her night hiding in a hedge after what she had experienced. Such was her level of fear. The Gardaí took no statements. They discouraged any pursuance of the incidents. By constantly telling her you've no case, well, it's up to you, do you really want to bother? A lot of difficulty. The woman ended up being offered a €150 meal voucher as compensation for the terror that she'd been put through that night. Do you think that's acceptable, Minister? That anyone, I don't care if they're a probationer, could think that that was acceptable? But let's look at that case in particular. There was actually, in the Byrne-McGinn report, which looked into the case, they said it was grossly exaggerated that there was a sexual assault. There was actually 2 sexual assaults took place on that bus that night. One woman leaving the bus was groped and sexually assaulted. And another woman, well, what would you call it when a woman is grabbed by her clothing by men? She's screaming, not let off the bus. I'd call that a sexual assault as well. And we all know that it just wasn't taken seriously whatsoever. The woman who was driving the bus turned down the meal voucher, thankfully, and ended up gets compensated €150. What does it tell you about attitudes to sexual harassment of women on the bus that night and to violence against women? Now, in the case of the assault on Mary Lynch, which has obviously been very publicised, we know the assault was eventually downgraded, that Mary Lynch wasn't told about to attend court. I had to laugh when her husband was rang on a couple of occasions. Meanwhile, Mary Lynch is ringing the Garda station, but the Guard doesn't see fit to ring the woman who's the actual victim. The Commission concludes, there was an agreement that her husband would be the point of contact. It's a bit like something now out of the 1930s, Minister. But the constant get-out clause throughout is that the Gardaí were new. They weren't being supervised, they were probationers. What does that say then about Garda training in Templemore in relation to attitudes to violence against women? For example, the horrific attack, the savage attack that took place on Mary Lynch in that taxi. Just to give you an idea, the woman was first of all brought to a secluded location deliberately. She was pulled by the head and told to get out of the car. Lumps were pulled out of her hair. The man had a zip opened and he tried to pull her out of the car. He kicked her repeatedly in the stomach for a number of minutes. He bit her shoulder and verbally abused her. Would that not tell you that this man might just be a danger to women, that he might repeat that pattern again? but the Gardaí in Cavan Monaghan don't seem to think so. I wonder, is that just that area? Is it a prevalent thing? Or what, Minister? But you should be asking questions about the attitudes to women. The case gets listed for mention, and I have to say nothing said about the judge in the cases as well, Minister, you should be concerned about, because my reading of it is the case got disposed of without the person being there, which is a breach of the Criminal Justice Act in that a victim is meant to have the right to give evidence for violence or a threat of violence. And the judge didn't see fit to question that. The Commission concluded it was all very regrettable. There's a myriad of features about that case, Minister, and of course we know that this man went on to abduct a child and to brutally murder another woman. Now, I'm not saying that every man who attacks a woman should be, that he might do, but yes, there is a pattern, Minister. And do you not think that the Gardaí should be getting educated about this? Because they seem to have a very flippant attitude. Just finally, I don't have time to deal with it, but the attack that took place on the 17-year-old girl. I mean, I don't know about you, but if a 17-year-old is walking home at night and a man grabs her, covers her mouth and tries to drag her somewhere, I think that would be potentially a sexual assault as well. And it certainly is unlikely to be for a robbery of a young girl who's unlikely to have very much money. And I think that for the investigations to conclude that a sexual motive was unlikely is just ridiculous. That was done by Superintendent Clancy. So, Minister, I'm just trying to bring out aspects that I haven't heard being brought out much in the media. But I do think this raises a general issue of confidence that women would have in the police in taking attacks and threats on them very seriously. And I think I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Thanks, Deputy.